Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to get involved today on a Penn Squall 15. I suspect this is going to be a two-part video because I'm thinking I'm going to need to order some parts. But let's go do the problem diagnosis on the front end of this, and then we'll see where this one takes us. So here's the problem. Now that's in free spool now, but that's definitely a grind noise and it's probably a gear. So we're going to take it apart and we're just going to check to see which gear it might be. I've also noticed as I'm looking at this that the free spool release is bent. And it may just be as simple as fixing this, because this may be traveling too far on the release. Because if I bring it up here, I'm not kind of getting that same noise. So we got a couple of things to look at here. In both cases, I suspect that I'm going to need some parts, and that's why I think this will be a two-part video. So before we get started, a couple of things. I like to wear a protective glove on my hand here to keep the real junk off of my hand. Also, I like to look for the schematic. The schematics are generally available at mysticparts.com, and I look for these because it'll give me the burst diagram of everything that's inside the reel. And more importantly, if parts are needed, you can order them from Mystic Parts as well, and the parts list is right behind the schematic diagram. So if you identify a particular gear or some issue that's going on there, then you can by all means look it up, go order the parts, and have them to you in a reasonable amount of time. So we're going to take a look at all of that. And the other thing I like to do when I start my videos is to thank first responders who are involved in the day-to-day essential personnel type activities during the pandemic. Without you, we would be in far worse shape. And I thank you for everything it is that you're doing to try and keep us and the general population safe and healthy as we combat this and wait for a vaccine and a cure. So we have a handle nut. I had the right one the first time. That's an 11 millimeter, not a 10. A lot of these reels have the 10 millimeter. I'm going to take that off. I like to take the handle and the star drag assembly off before I take the side plate off. Generally speaking, we have a series here of the external parts that get in the way. So if you take these external parts off to begin with, all the better. So a lot of folks ask me what I think about the Penn Squall. I think it's a beautiful reel. I think that it's well designed, it's strong. If there's one thing I've noticed, it's that this pinion gear for some reason is the weak link, and I've had to replace a couple of those already on this reel. Not this particular reel, but this series of reels. And I'm not quite sure why that is, but it might be the metal that it's made of, not sure. Note this sequence that these pieces and parts come out, and it's always important as you go to reinstall. So we have a click ridges inside the cap, and then we have this little pyramid on the spring here that's going to let you know that you're clicking down. And then we have two bell washers. They're concave, they're not flat. In this case, they're face to face, so when I go to reinstall, I will do that. Good time to take pictures, right? Grab a digital camera, grab your cell phone. Any of those things may be the right answer in terms of taking pictures. You can also do what I do here, take a video, and that way if you get stuck along the way, or if you have to put your project down and go somewhere and then come back, you'll know that the sequence of the pieces and parts and the orientation of them and the like that was there when you took them off, so that you can come back and find them at a later date. We have two screws on the outside. We have two screws here, and I believe there's a little screw hiding underneath this one here. So don't, if you take the 4 screws out and you find that this plate is not moving, you're going to have to remove that plate as well. So let's do that. We're going to use a appropriate size screwdriver for that. You want a screwdriver that fits the slot. If it's undersized, you have a chance of ripping those out, so please be careful as you take those off. Notice where they come from. And what I'm doing right now for the moment is I'm laying them side to side just to make sure that if there are differences, they're noted. And there is a difference. The ones on the back of the case are smaller in diameter And they also have a more rounded head than the tapered head of the ones that came out of the trim ring. Duly noted. So when you go to reinstall, you will have that as a reference point as to where they belong. Alright, I've taken them off. They're going to go into my parts tray so I don't lose them. Now we have separation there, but the case isn't coming off, which sort of tells me that we've got a screw hiding under here. And normally you can just pick this up, just tilt this forward a little bit, and yep, we have a little micro screw there. Done several of these recently, so it kind of refreshes my memory that that one is there. As you take this one off, then the case will come out. So again, a parts tray is great for little screws like that, little springs and the like. You don't lose them by putting them on a table or the like. With that, now you can see that the yoke springs are releasing. You have separation in the case. And we're just going to pull this up and see what we got in here. So first thing I'm looking for then is the springs. There's 2 cavity springs. This is a good place to take a picture. The reason for that is a lot of times you can see this and think, okay, this is like the other Penn reels that I've done, where the yoke and the pinion gear and the springs all mount to the case. That's not the way this one works. They mount to the side plate back here, and then the case falls over it. It's easy enough to do because it's kind of the same setup. So just be aware of that as you're doing this. So the case and the side plate, I'm going to take those 2 springs out. I'll put those into my tray. Great place to take a picture so that you know what this looks like when you get done. Next up then, we're going to grab the anti-reverse bearing and the shield. Notice on the anti-reverse bearing you have a plastic side and you have a metal side. The metal side faces up. If you put it the other way, you're going to have essentially a left-hand working reel in terms of the way that it will break for you. It's not going to work. Alright, next up then, we can pull the main gear. You'll notice that we have an assembly on here. If you needed to replace the gear shaft, you would pull those 2 pieces. Don't need to do that on this particular one, so we're just going to leave that as it is. We'll come up top there, we'll pull the pinion gear. That simply slides off where the 2 springs were. And we are going to pull the jack. So other than being dirty, we want to examine this pinion gear right now. And I'm seeing some bent teeth. You can see, I don't know if you can see on the video. Let's see if we can bring this up close. It's probably not the easiest to see, but we have bent teeth on here. And you should just have a straight pick through here, and there's bent teeth. So we're going to go replace this piece, which is what I kind of thought would be part of the solution. And the other part of the solution, I think, is that we have a bent eccentric arm. So I'm going to order the pinion gear. We're going to come back and we'll show you how to reset all of this in part 2 once that piece comes in. But let's go ahead and do that other piece there, which is the bent free spool lever. Because if we can't solve that at this point, then we might as well order a new one. You can tell that it's not 90 degrees here. It's pointing out. You can tell that this has been bent over. So if you were getting rough about it, you could actually probably just grab that with a pliers or something and try and bend it back into shape. I generally don't like doing that because what's going to happen is you're going to put pressure on the case. If you put pressure on the case, you could get in trouble. What I want to do is remove that arm. Again, use the appropriate size screwdriver. I'm going to try and leave this intact here as best I can. The screw, note the screw, this is a good place to take a picture. The spring is upside down, if you will. It hooks behind that little cavity there and goes into the eccentric. It's always good to note that stuff as you walk away from it. Alright, we're going to try, you can just by eyeball, you can see that that's not running square. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to put a little pressure on it and then a vise. See see if I can't square that up a little bit better. Now we're getting a little bit better there. And sometimes it just has to be tapped out. So at this point, I think I'm just going to gently hit it with a bit of a hammer there. Now we're square. Now let's see how that works when we put it back on the fork here. Okay, so what happened was this tripped past where it should, because that's what happens with these things. Turn your free spool handle upside down, move it till you find a balance point, then set it back the other way. Didn't quite get that balance point there. There's a natural balance point at the halfway mark. This is usually will snap, but the weight of that arm is not letting me do that. So as usual, you need one more hand. Let's see if we can do it this way. Let's get that screw started first. So that will limit the travel of that, there we go, so we're pretty much square now versus what it was. And this will limit the travel on this piece here, which will limit the travel on your jack, and it may very well be that that jack was affecting the reel overall. So we're going to stop this right here. When we come back, what we'll do is, well, let's go one step further. We can service the main gear because that's not part of the pinion gear environment there, so we can go ahead and do that. It also helps too. I'm going to be ordering parts for this. If there was something wrong in the main gear stack assembly, well, you would certainly want to know that before you go ordering parts and then wind up finding that you need additional parts later. So I'm going to remove the drag stack. This one's kind of opposite what you see in most drag stacks, in that it's the drag washer itself that is the one that's holding the main gear, and it's the floaters, if you will, that provide the spin, where the other way around it usually has an eared washer in there that locks in the main gear, and it's the fabric washers that spin from a drag perspective. So these drags actually have a little bit too much grease on them. You can see it's just been spilled out to the side, and there's no value in grease that sits on the sidelines. It's not like a substitute ball player that's going to go in and play. It's not. It's just going to sit there. So get those out of the way, and you can see we have no eared washers in this drag washer setup. So I'm going to just clean this out. If you need to, you can use a cotton swab to clean the channels. We have a little bit of that carry over there, so let's make sure that that gets out of the channel. What happens with grease that sits on the sidelines is it just kind of grabs contaminants of that, and over time just acts as a sandpaper if that's what the contaminant was. So again, plenty of grease. If there wasn't plenty of grease, I would go to the drag grease, put a little bit on there, rub it in with my gloved hand, and then wipe off the excess. This one's had plenty of grease on it, and I just took care of wiping off the excess. Fabric washer goes first. Round washer next. Fabric washer again. Next round washer. Fabric washer. Top washer. This one is got an almost rectangular. It's got two straight sides and two slightly curved sides, almost like a running track, if you will. That's got to sit on the end of the gear sleeve properly. It'll mount like this. What I'm going to do before I go to the next step then is I'm just going to grab this cotton swab and get the old grease out from behind the jack. It's much easier to do it this way than it is later. Now we can go ahead and install the main gear, which has a washer on the back of it. Get that snapped in. put that washer on, and this is all I can do to this point. So once we get the new pinion gear, we'll be able to place the pinion gear on, be able to place the springs, the jack, close this side up, and go to the other side of the reel to make sure that the spool is serviced and that this reel gets back fishing again. But for now, this is where we're going to leave it. And next time you see me, it'll probably be in about 4 or 5 days. And at that point in time, we'll go back and make this one whole and get this one back to Jim to go fishing. Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're back. It's been about a week, a couple of days since we ordered that part from Mystic Parts. We've had a pinion gear here that's been damaged, and that was causing a whine in the reel, and I was asked to make that whine go away. Last time we left it, we had put the main gear on it. That was basically for safekeeping. We're going to remove that in order to install the new pinion gear. I'll show you how to do that again if that becomes problematic with you. And let's go take the new one out. Now we're going to show you the real reassembly from the side plate, the gear side plate. Then we'll work on the non-gear side plate to service the spool. So let's just get our brush clean there. Have a new gear, so by habit you check the teeth anyway, but we found that we had scarred teeth in the older one. I don't know what caused that, a misalignment of gears somewhere along the line, but regardless, it was causing a whine, and we're just going to replace the part. You can't straighten teeth on a gear. Alright, so we got a nice coating of grease on that. We'll put some grease onto the shaft there. Also the yoke, I pulled the yoke out on this one. So we'll go ahead and make sure that the collar of the yoke where that gear is going to slide, get some grease on it. And also we're going to have the jack behind this, so we want to make sure that we have grease on that as well. So let's start. We have one more piece here, which is the jack. I'm going to make sure that we get some grease on that. Alright, so the jack is going to slide over the top. Let's see if we can do it like this, show you. It kind of sits in that groove. We want to take our spool gear and yoke. The one with the indentation side, the V-notch or U-notch cut in, it goes on the spool. So it goes this way. I'll pull that jack up so you can press down on the assembly. And we have the two springs. One of them stayed on the case. So the spring's gone. Now we can reassemble the main gear. It rarely goes on the right way, so I'm probably going to do what I did before. We stop this, just put them in piece by piece, but that's okay. It doesn't hurt to repeat and show you the process. The first one is to install that metal washer over the bridge shaft, and on that it's not circular, it's rectangle, so make sure that it sits properly on that. And we have our little bottom. Then we had alternating drag washers and metal washers, and if I get it right I don't have to take them out, but if I don't get it right, there we go, we're okay. Then I would have repeated the process for you. That's going to snap on. There we go, just like that. Then we just want to make sure it spins nicely. It's spinning the way it should. Let's get grease onto the main gear then. And you don't have to put it on every tooth, but get enough that it's going to lubricate it. And as it spins around, it will work its way into the teeth and keep it properly lubricated. Okay, that's the main gear assembly. Now what we want to do is we want to grab the side plate. Now the side plate is going to work on matching this stud on the eccentric, and put a little bit of grease on that, into the hole of the jack Best way to do that is make sure that it is in the up position. That's where we are now. And then some of it is visual, but eventually you will get the alignment proper. It's the ferrule coming out. And I think I actually have it on the first one. You'll notice if you're in gear, you can turn the main shaft, and if you're in free spool, that main shaft won't turn, so I did mesh that too, those two pieces together. So then we want to start with the side plate case screws, and if you weren't paying attention, the first case screw really is the small one. You can't put the two larger ones in because you have a trim ring, and right now you're trying to hold this assemblies because the springs are putting pressure on the outside of it. So go for the small case screw first. That should take the pressure off, and also turn around, and you have two different sizes on the case screws. The smaller of the two go in the back. And if you had any questions, hopefully you're following the advice to take pictures along the way. You could go back and check that, and if worst case you didn't take pictures and you were in question, go to the schematic and check it out that way. But regardless, make sure you match them. I don't think that in this case these are a different diameter screws, so if you tried to put the larger ones which belonged in the side plate here, I don't believe they would have worked. Okay, take this free spool lever, move it to the center position. You can see there's a gap here now. You should be able to achieve that balance, and that's how you bring the trim ring in from behind, and then you should just be able to snap it there. Then you can trip your lever. We have two more case screws on this side. So I know that there's a lot of folks keep asking where these reels made. This reel was made in China. If that means anything to you, it's a nice design, it's a nice reel. I rarely buy reels new, but if I was to be in the market for a lightweight star drag reel for inshore fishing, this is a good candidate for that. It's a nicely made reel. You saw the inside of it. It's got nice gearing. I'm not quite sure what's scarred. The other one, it did get scarred, and easily replaceable, as you saw. We have two bell washers. They were set opposing. I call them bell washers. They kind of look like a bell. They're not flat. They have an indentation on one side and a hump on the other. These were set opposing. Their purpose is to regulate the drag tension on the adjustability on that star drag, this piece. So that's what's causing, if you set them face to face, you get less. If you set them opposing like that, you get more variability. So it's really all about you and the feel of it. Okay, we've got the star adjuster on next. Next up then would be the handle. We have a little washer that rides on top of that handle. If you had any questions, you could go to the schematic. Then this one, I'm going to apologize to James. I'm not quite sure where he had that set. I'm going to set it in this one. It's easy enough to change it over if you were using the other slot. This is an 11mm nut next, so you want to just grab your wrench. Generally, if you align the flat spot of the nut with that set screw hole, you will be able to put the nut cap on without searching terribly. Looks like I almost had it there. I actually have to back it off the tiniest bit. But you can see now, you can't see, but the hole and the nut are aligned. And we can put our set screw in. And this cap holds that nut from rotating and loosening on the shaft. Before we go any further, we're going to give this a little twirl. That's a whole lot better than it was. Nice, easy spinning reel. Let's go over to the other side then. I'm going to just service the bearing on this side of the spool and the spool itself. You can't take the spool out from the other side. Need a thicker screwdriver for this. Alright, just continuing to work these screws out. These screws have a little bit of salt on them or some kind of composite dirt. So I'm going to lay them on the table to make sure they're all the same length. I believe they're not. And I am going to give them a little WD-40 just to remove some of that salt. There's another one that's causing some sticking. So we have two smalls and two long. The two long go into the cross post. I'm just going to hit that with some WD-40 and let it just sit there for a moment. This is a penetrating oil, doesn't have to be WD-40. Any kind of penetrating oil will help. And we should be able to remove the side plate. And we have pretty much a dry side plate, which is probably another reason why we have a little bit of noise going on there. Just clean this up. So if I forgot to mention that it's been a week or so since we opened this reel up, thank you to all the first responders that are out there. And if you have a role that you're playing in terms of keeping us all safe and healthy during this pandemic, then thank you so much for what you're doing. We do appreciate it all, and we certainly look forward to the day when we all will be free of this virus. In the meantime, try to do everything we can to stay safe, stay healthy, and pay attention to what we're being asked to do on our part. We'll all get through this together. There's a bearing in here, so let's make sure that gets oiled on both sides. There's a through shaft to this as well. Okay, next up then, we want to make sure that we lubricate our mechanism here. This looks like it's pretty darn dry. This is a magnetic stripe here for the mag brake on it. This can use a little bit of a buffing. Let's try and clean that up. There's a little bit of rust on here. I imagine this is steel, which would make sense from a magnetic standpoint. It's smooth, but it's a little banged up there. And then let's just check to see what we got here. Okay, we gotta just checking how that mag sits, which is fine. It seems like there's some roughness on here, which is causing some chafing on that spool. I'm just going to use a light flat file. If there's any high spot here, we'll go get that off. There we go, we're smooth with that now. Alright, and then we just want to, we've oiled that. Everything else looks good. Just going to put some grease onto the side shaft of this, because that is going to sit inside that spool carrier. A little bit of grease onto the top, which is going to go internal to the spool. And we can kind of close this back up. So let's take the spool assembly, make sure that's well greased. You can see the end of our pinion gear coming through on that side. Let's go reinstall there. Make sure that that's properly seated. And grab our assembly again. And we've got some little bit of that salt buildup there as well inside the posts, so let me go and just put some oil in there to dissolve that too. Now, okay, looks like we're in. The two long ones go into the side plate with the crossbars. Oops. Need my little trim ring. Now we can put those long ones into the crossbars. one for this side. And the two short ones go north and south on this reel. They just go into the case. One goes low. There you go. There's your Penn Squall. Your beautiful casting roll to it. It's a good casting reel for sure, or for jigging. Okay, that's it. That's the Penn Squall 15. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And again, if you're a first responder, thank you for everything it is that you do. Really do appreciate your efforts. And we look forward to seeing you enjoying yourself rather than working on these pandemic issues all the time. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.